All right, welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in today with Bruegel. My name is Mario Marinello. I'm Senior Fellow here at Bruegel, and I will have the honor to moderate today's event on protection of online platform workers. This event is part of a broad long-term project on the future of work and inclusive growth that has recently been launched by Bruegel in collaboration with Mastercard. The idea of the project was prompted by the recognition that the narrative, which is often associated with technological progress, has a bug, to use a techie expression. We are used to be told that the digital economy is our future and there cannot be prosperity without technology. And yet, incredible technological progress has been achieved in recent years, but we are more and more living in a society which is unequal, in which the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So there seems to be something wrong with this happy narrative. For example, it's certainly possible that AI will generate more jobs than it will destroy. But the real question is, will those jobs be better or worse than the ones that people had before the technological revolution? And I think the gig economy, the sharing economy, the platform economy, I mean, like you can call it in many ways, is probably the best example of this irony, which has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. During the pandemic, it became apparent how important are online platform workers. They were essential, for example, to guarantee home delivery or public transport, but they were also on the front line, exposed to the virus and to the effect of the crisis, and were also left with very little protection. So technology has created lots of new jobs thanks to online platforms, and has also provided for key solution to lockdown economies, but it also generated new vulnerabilities to which policymakers and business sectors still have to be able to, to give a strong answer. And this is exactly the question that we had in mind when we launched this project. I mean, how can we turn, from research to action, to propose a implementable, effective solution to the apparent inconsistencies that are generated by technology? How can we steer technological innovation to achieve a prosperity which is really shared by all members of society and not a privilege for some? So before getting into the debate and tackle the question specific in the context of online platform workers with our fantastic speakers that I will introduce later, let me give the word to Shamina Singh, who is the founder and president of the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, who kindly accepted to tell us a little bit about the work and the project. Shamina. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shamina Singh, and I'm the president of the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, which is the philanthropic hub of Mastercard. As Mario said, this incredible technology has provided many new opportunities, particularly for women, youth, and marginalized groups, but it also presents new pressing challenges. And COVID has just exposed how severe those challenges are. For example, contract workers account for around 4 out of 10 in the industries hardest hit by COVID, including tourism, catering, and restaurants. They are forced to live without a safety net. In fact, gig workers weren't eligible for relief during COVID. So there are structural inequities in the system that I'm hoping this esteemed panel will talk about today. From our perspective, this is really an all hands, all in moment when purpose-driven private sector actors need to come together with government and the social sector under the auspices of an eminent organization like Bruegel to urgently accelerate COVID relief and recovery and really build forward anew. Together, we have to achieve exponential accelerated impact. None of us can do this on our own. And that's why I am, and we're looking forward to this first discussion today, but know that it's just the beginning. The valuable insights we're going to hear from our speakers depend on the collective action that happens tomorrow and the day after. So let's make sure to listen intently today, but turn our attention to what happens next and stay focused on what the intended impact really is here. At the center, we believe the greatest impact comes from bringing cross-sector actors to the table to coalesce around an evidence base and connect that evidence to meaningful action. This is precisely why we are partnering with Bruegel on this 3-year research to action network on the future of work and inclusive growth in Europe. And we couldn't be more pleased that Mario, with his deep expertise at the intersection of digital and economic policy, most recently serving as digital advisor for the European Political Strategy Center, has agreed to lead this work for us. The speakers here today represent conveyors of practical, actionable solutions grounded in rigorous research, and will provide clear calls to action for policymakers, private sector leaders, and of course, worker training organization. Because the hope really here is that we can collaborate to achieve collective ownership and shared learning. We're thankful to Bruegel for the partnership, past, present, and future, and to our exceptional panelists here today, who will help set the stage. We look forward to getting to work and welcome all of you to join us on this journey. Back to you, Mario.
Thank you very much, Shamina, for this kind introduction. Very, very kind. So let's get started on the discussion. I don't want to keep anymore the audience waiting. Let's jump into the debate. Let me just remind to everybody that you can use Slido with the code GIG in order to write your questions, and I will try to pose them to the speakers during the discussion. So let's start. I would say the best way to start is really with Diane Mulcahy. She is probably one of the most prominent world thought leaders on the gig economy. She wrote the best-selling book about it, translated in 5 languages. She's advisor Fortune 500 on the future of work, and she launched the first MBA course in the US on the gig economy. So I don't think there is really any better person who could really introduce the discussion, the context, and the challenges for online platform workers. Diane, floor is yours. Thank you for accepting.
Thank you, Mario. And welcome everybody. And thanks to Bruegel and to Mastercard for hosting this discussion, which I think is a much needed discussion for gig economy workers. So just to start, I think it's helpful to set the stage by defining how I talk about the gig economy, which is quite broad and includes really anybody who works independently. So it can include professional workers like consultants, advisors, and freelancers, as well as platform and on-demand workers. I'm based in the US, so we'll primarily speak from that perspective, but I'm also familiar with the European labor markets. And in terms of platforms, I think it's important to acknowledge the breadth of platforms that exist today. As Mario said in the beginning in his opening remarks, people immediately think about Uber and Deliveroo, and those are important platforms in the gig economy, but they certainly aren't the only ones. There are platforms like Lyft, TaskRabbit, and Instacart that are also primarily physically based, as well as platforms for professional workers. For example, here in the US, there's platforms like TopTal for software engineers, platforms like Catalent that focus on placing MBAs, and like Axiom that are dedicated to helping lawyers find contract work. So just to set the stage that the platform economy or the gig economy is actually much broader than just Uber. So with that as a background, I think the issue that we're talking about today about gig workers and the situation that they find themselves in is a really important policy issue. And to me, this really is a policy issue. Our labor markets, and this is both in the US and in Europe, are really designed around full-time employees and full-time jobs. If you're a person who chooses not to be a full-time employee or you can't find full-time work, So you end up working independently or you're working as a self-employed person. Our current labor market policies really punish you for that, in the sense that once you leave full-time employment and go out on your own, you are denied access to the safety nets, benefits, and protections that right now our policies make only accessible to full-time employees. So what that means is we're left with this obsolete labor market structure and policies that don't really reflect or support all workers. They really just focus on full-time employees. And that is incredibly, it's already obsolete, but is becoming more obsolete as more and more people decide to work independently or to become self-employed in the gig economy. So our labor market structure and policies really needs to catch up to the ways that people work today, the many varied ways people work today. Restructuring our labor market and our policies might seem like a monumental undertaking, and in many ways it is. But I thought it would be helpful just to point out how easy it can also be. For example, here in the US, since COVID came to the US last spring, the US government quickly realized that unemployment insurance, which is income protection for employees, would not be sufficient to navigate through the crisis. The gig economy and gig workers make up such an increasingly important and growing percent of the labor market that really we were forced to find a policy solution to provide income protection to those workers during the pandemic. And what happened was, within weeks, we made that available to gig workers. So if you were self-employed or you worked independently on a platform or in the gig economy, you could access traditional unemployment insurance to help you, to help provide income protection to you through the pandemic. And I think that the ability for the US to make that change so quickly and to step in and provide that safety net to those gig economy workers was a really powerful example of how we can do that, how we can extend those traditional rights and benefits that have only been accessible to full-time employees to all workers. I suspect that once this pandemic is over, it will be very hard to roll that back. Now that we know that we can do it, and now that the gig economy workers have experienced access to that safety net, I think it will be very hard to step back from that. So I think the thought that I would leave you with is the policy challenge for us in Europe and in the US is to think about how do we update our labor market and policies to extend those benefits and protections that we have traditionally only given to employees to all workers, and how do we make that safety net and benefits and protections available to gig economy workers.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. Very, very nice way to put it. I have already like a couple of questions that I would like to ask you, but I mean, maybe it's better if we do just the first round and then we'll get to the discussion later. So our next speaker is Payal Dalal, who is Senior Vice President at the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth. Payal has a very long, high-profile experience in the public and private sector, supervising philanthropic projects. Most recently, she led Mastercard's research efforts on potential new tools to protect workers during the digital transformation. And this, I think, is very relevant for online platforms worker too. So I'm very happy that we have her here today to share those insights with us. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mario, and thanks to Bruegel for convening such an important discussion today. I'm really looking forward to learning from everyone here on the panel. I think what today's conversation boils down to is how we ensure that the digital economy works for everyone, everywhere, with a specific and special focus on platform workers. I think as the digital economy increasingly becomes the economy, we need to ensure that people, workers, and organizations have access to the networks, tools, and solutions that they need to reach their potential and achieve financial security. And the thing is, it's complex, it's multifaceted, and it's going to require new ways of thinking, partnering, and building. And so with that in mind, I just want to make 3 points, Mario. And this really reiterates what Diane just talked about. The first point is that we need to create a benefits infrastructure that's built for the platform worker. Mm-hmm. The work system is complicated, and while the nature of work has changed, the way we deliver benefits hasn't. And so now there's really a pressing need to modernize benefits and create that 21st century safety net so workers can really succeed in this digital economy. At the center, in partnership with really influential and forward thinkers like Bruegel, we're rethinking how workers can access and thrive from a new system of benefits. And the system of benefits has to be people-centric. It has to be portable. It has to be interoperable, and it has to be inclusive. But most importantly, it has to be one that belongs to the workers themselves. So that's really my first point, is that we really need to create a benefits infrastructure that's built for platform workers. Secondly, it's not just an infrastructure issue, it's also a behavior and skills issue. So we need to build skills and we need to incentivize behaviors that bolster workers' financial health. On the skills side, we need to think about how we enable lifelong learning and skills development. In this era of increasingly technological disruption from various sectors and occupations, workers need to have access to the tools that they need to help with the upskilling and the training. And especially if we think about those workers that are most vulnerable to the disruption of automation, robotics, and AI, they're going to require digital skills, they're going to require soft skills to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. So just one quick example of what we're doing at the center is we're working with Bayes Impact and the RSA to test an innovative and scalable approach to lifelong learning that via a digital platform can actually deliver career and employability coaching to underserved workers in France and in the UK. And we have a specific focus on platform workers as well in that program. But it's not just a skills problem. It's also something we have to focus on is how we enable behavior change. A couple of examples of how we've been trying to do that at the center. In 2018, we partnered with the RSA in the UK to run an accelerator for social enterprises and fintechs who are building new tools, networks, and resources to help workers plan for their financial and economic security. And this year in Latin America, the center is partnering with digital platforms and behavioral psychologists to design nudges and interventions that really incentivize gig workers and gig entrepreneurs to increase their savings. So that's really my second point, is that it's a behavior and skills issue as well as an infrastructure challenge. And the last point I just want to make, really doubles down on the point that Shamina was making. This has to be a multi-sectoral approach. Public sector, private sector, civil society, and the worker. And that's why it's great to see such a diverse panel of speakers who come from at different sides. I think we have to work across sectors and across silos to come up with these innovative models and solutions that are not only going to be sustainable, but that are going to be scalable. And speaking as someone from the private sector, I think the private sector has a huge role and responsibility to play in this area. At Mastercard, we're really trying to play this role as convener and leader. And just one thing that we're doing actually this week is in partnership with Zenteo's Europe Delivers program. Mastercard Europe is actually hosting a series of design sprints for about 30 various stakeholders to develop products, tools, and partnerships to enable an inclusive, flexible economy. And so we're looking at how we can build an inclusive new financial safety net. And the workshops are really a great example of private-private partnerships and highlight both that need and opportunity to form those non-traditional partnerships and how you make those non-traditional partnerships into transformative partnerships. So at these design sprints, we have private sector companies, we have the platforms themselves, we have academics, we have think tanks, we have NGOs at the table, but also at the table, and I think this is really important, we had gig workers themselves. And that's kind of the point I want to leave you all with, is that platform workers need to be at the table as we work towards building these innovative solutions and innovative policies. So I'm going to leave my comments there, but I look forward to a terrific discussion and learning from my fellow panelists.
Right. No, thank you very much, Payal. I mean, these are very interesting subjects. I mean, already, I would say already, there are so many complementarities with what also Diane was saying. For example, I mean, she mentioned that we should extend the infrastructure of benefits, from traditional to also to include also the let's say the new form of levers. But maybe we also have to consider other form of benefits that are not there, because I mean there are some vulnerabilities that are just new, if you want. So I mean, like, the two your two remarks, I mean, actually complement each other in a sense. And also, I mean, like, about the role really of the public sector and the private sector. I mean, how do they interact? What role should be taken by the public, and what can we expect from the platform sector itself? How can maybe we can expect some correction coming from the market itself, but I mean, maybe this is also not enough. So I mean, there is a lot of things to discuss. I mean, like, I don't want to preempt too much the discussion, but I mean, our next speaker is Jakob Rudbach, who, I mean, I'm very glad is with us today, because Jakob is the founder and CEO of Yepster. I hope I pronounce it correctly, which is thank you, which is a Swedish online platform that basically allows teenagers and young adults to do a wide range of jobs, like walking a dog, washing a car, babysitting, and a number of tasks. It's very heterogeneous, I would say. Now, the very interesting aspect of Yepster is the fact that Jakob has been championing a model which doesn't seem to be widely accepted, to say the least, by online platforms. In fact, Yepster offer temporary fixed contracts to all its 5,000 employees. Correct me if I'm wrong again, Jakob. But it's interesting because it's a kind of the opposite of "we are not employers." That is the mantra of of many online platforms, successful online platforms. So, Jakob, can you tell us a little bit about your business, where you come from, and is it possible? Does it work in practice? I mean, like this for online platforms?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mario. And yeah, I'll try to keep the marketing to an absolute minimum, but I think it's worthwhile that I quickly cover what we do. So Yepster is Sweden's largest platform for typical teenage jobs like babysitting, tutoring, dog minding, etc. Why are we focused on this problem? Well, because there are nearly 1 billion, so 950 million young people between 15 and 24 looking for an extra job, and nobody cares. There's no company that sees that as a potentially profitable market. There is no big organizations fighting just that problem. And that's what I'm passionate about. I started mowing lawns when I was 13 because I had to. I didn't get a lot of money from my parents. And that led to mentorship, that led to help on how to get my first job. That essentially changed the course of my whole life. So helping these 1 billion young people to their first extra jobs, I think, is the root cause issue to many of the societal issues we see today. So I'm not here to talk about the Uber drivers, the Foodora deliveries, because that's everything that is currently talked about. I'm here to talk about the massive opportunities that are not discussed, who don't have any strong advocates fighting for them. So I'm talking about young people looking for extra jobs. I'm talking about elderly looking for help. I'm talking about parents with young children who, feel like they're drowning in stress, or single parents who haven't had a chance to go on a date for years. I'm talking about the 98% of people who cannot afford these services or don't have a chance to get this extra job because their parents are not well connected enough. And these are groups are never seen or measured. I see the big opportunity for the platform economy here. So I'm really sad that it's so simplified that we're still talking about, a few thousand Uber drivers and a few thousand cyclists. It feels like, when internet arrived, if the postal service was sitting there and saying, hello, we have rules, and the whole discussion ended up stopping the internet for decades, because this discussion has been talked about since 1990. Quick, short-term, flexible jobs is nothing new. So I am like Greta Thunberg. I am disappointed in our politicians that we have not gotten further, and that we're still, in this archaic model discussing taxi drivers. So if anyone's successful, yes, then it's probably the transport sector. But there are billions suffering from it. So what can we do? I think the first thing, like there are three things. So the first thing is to simply accept that gig economy 1.0 is broken. The sooner we accept that the current model is not working, the better. Otherwise we have this consistent political gridlock. So there are examples of poor working conditions, unjust salaries, all these things which are not good. So the sooner everybody accepts that gig economy 1.0 is not good enough, the quicker we can move on to say, okay, what's gig economy 2.0 or platform economy 2.0? What do we want? The second thing then is to really focus where it matters, not focus on the ones who are the most vocal. Once again, I'm talking about the transport sector. Politicians' job should be to focus where the biggest opportunities lie. And when we're talking about this technical evolution and the future of work, those opportunities lie in those areas around. It's not the labor market itself, I would argue. It's all the oil around it that makes the labor market work as well as possible. So these students, young people who are 1.3 billion in total and 950 million looking for an extra job, that's a massive opportunity. Let's focus there instead of these 1,000 cyclists and drivers. So yeah, focus where it matters, I think is something the politicians should adopt as soon as possible. The world will be better off. And finally, what should we do first? Like, what's the first step? Well, I would argue focus on extra jobs. That's what the platform economy is built for. It's like perfect. If the politicians succeeded in setting a framework to allow extra jobs to prosper, then we would really do something about youth unemployment, elderly care, all of these things. So setting that framework and focusing on extra jobs. So what I mean when I talk about that is that I'm talking about independent jobs. So jobs that the person is free to decide if I take it or not. And I'm talking about private to private jobs. So private individuals doing jobs for other private individuals. As soon as we branch out into private individuals working for companies or, like platforms forcing workers to take certain jobs, then it's no longer platform economy. Then it's no longer free, I would say. So those two things.
But yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Did you finish your remarks?
Yep.
Okay, no, sorry. Then I hope I haven't misunderstood, because I saw your interview with Politico. It looked like you were proposing a different model. Like, online platforms can be flexible, still hiring, still offering like this employment contract. Then please, correct me if that's not correct. For regarding to your platform. But let me just say one thing. I agree with you that the discussion has been a little bit too much narrowed to transport and to delivery. But there is also a reason why. During the pandemic, Uber drivers and people cycling delivery, they were very much exposed to the virus. They were exposed to the risks. The discussion became a little bit a cliche. And so it's wrong, to just, say, tailor our solutions on the basis of just that. But we can also deny that this is very, very problematic for them. We need to find a way to protect the Uber drivers, and we need to find a way to protect the cyclists. You know what I mean? And also, just I'll give you the word back on this. It seems to me that there is a lot to take the lead from what you were saying. There is a lot of opportunity, both for people and a lot of opportunity for companies as well, to create profits, to create value. It's clear. The transport sector, public transport sector, it's, that's the reason why this platform flourish. In Florence, try to take a taxi. It's really, expensive. So there are really, opportunities for creating value. Now, the question is, if you adopt, let's say, more costly models, like the one of hiring you know, a person, like guaranteeing minimum wage, like guaranteeing like all minimum benefits that are definitely necessary, I think. I think there's still, you know, scope for a lot of value to go to the companies as well. I mean, it's not that, I mean, all these companies will go bust, because as you say, there are a lot of opportunities. So, you know, if this is like, you know, the profits that is, you know, is made, I mean, why don't we get here? Why don't we reduce a little bit the profits that are made by increasing slightly the cost, which is obviously normal. I mean, like, you know, if you increase the benefits, I mean, like if you enter into like more like, you know, stiff employment relationships, these businesses will still be good, will still work. That's why, I mean, I also wanted to hear your views, because it seems that you did that in a sector that I'm not sure is as profitable as transport. So how does it work? I mean, please tell us if it's possible.
Yeah, happy to cover that. And well, first of all, I agree with you on a policy level that there should be an opportunity for all platform companies to take the right level of responsibility and ensure employer contributions are paid and pensions are paid and insurances are in place, etc. We are the most logical actor to do that, instead of give that responsibility to each driver, each cyclist, each young entrepreneur. So it does make sense. However, I want to say that I am not the expert in full-time gig work, which is what you're talking about, like full-time adults trying to provide for a family. You know, I think that is a very complex situation, and it's been discussed for years, and it will probably continue to be discussed for years. I just don't want to let that put an end or stop all the development in these huge opportunity areas, which include private to private interactions. So over to our business model. So what we've done at Yepster is, starting 1st of January 2021, we said, okay, fine, we are the employers. So when a young entrepreneur works, they are employed by us during the time that they are working. And this means we take care of all employer contributions, vacation pay, you know, the lot. And are there any collective bargaining agreements that we could sign up to? Absolutely not, because they are 50 years old and they require myself essentially to inspect, you know, somebody's garden in the north of Sweden. You know, it's impossible. Like, I as a CEO cannot have that responsibility. So we have simply taken this step, which everybody else is scared of, because the current legal framework doesn't really allow for it. And we've said that we believe that society will be intelligent. And the three parts of being an employer, which is the administrative, you know, the physical working environment, but also the systematic improvement work, we can cover 100% two of them. The administrative, so ensuring pensions, vacation pay, all of that is done. And the systematic work, collecting input from our young entrepreneurs. Did they feel unsafe at any point in time? Were they stressed? Were they nervous, etc.? And continue to improve our service and information. But the physical working environment, so what actually happens when you know, your neighbor's daughter is babysitting in your home, we have very little opportunity to do anything about that. So then it's more important that we inform you, to make sure it's safe. If there's anything you're worried about, you know, inform the person. And I'm happy to say we've done nearly 100,000 tasks through Yepster. You know, the damage or the amount of people getting hurt is we've had 2 incidents. You know, there was one kid who did end up having to get 2 stitches because he cut himself doing some gardening work, and there was one girl who dropped and broke her iPhone. But so these are simple jobs, and I think that's part of it, also ensuring that that's what's transferred through Yepster.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, like one nice takeaway, which I mean, like leads also very well to our last speaker, is that you said, well, you know, I mean, many online platforms don't do that because the system is not prepared. It's interesting that you said that. I mean, okay, it's not that they don't do it because it's impossible to hire as such. I mean, like, because this is like too expensive. They don't do it because the system around it is not equipped to allow them to I mean, at least this is your takeaway, which is very interesting, I think, as an angle. So we get to our last speaker, Ana Carla Pereira, who is a member of the cabinet of the European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, Nicola Schmidt. And she has a long experience within the European Commission dealing with social protection policies. You worked also on the new skill agenda for Europe. You know, lots of things. I mean, and it's very interesting because you are now focusing on clearly on online platform workers, but you also have a lot of experience with the traditional, you know, social protection system. So I mean, I'm so glad that you're here. Also to give your, you know, general perspective and to connect the dots. Incidentally, today the European Commission has opened a consultation that I'm sure that Ana Carla will tell us about on these issues. And I mean, like, you know, I think this seminar was also part of our intent to contribute to that discussion too. So Ana Carla, please, I mean, like the words to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mario, and thank you all for inviting me to this very timely conversation. As Mario mentioned, the Commission today has adopted what we call is a first stage consultation to social partners on the working conditions for people work through platforms. That's already a big title. So I'll try to break this title in several pieces and try to come to what is that we are, what we have published today. Before I do that, I think it's important that I comment on a couple of things that have been said already. The first thing is the dimension of the phenomena. First of all, the gig economy, as Diane mentioned, is much broader than platform. And our consultation is about platform. So we already are looking at a scope that is more reduced than what we call in English the gig economy. The second element is that we are not talking about 100,000 riders or drivers. We are talking about potentially already 10% of the EU workforce. There have been surveys already, so this is not systematic collection of data, but there have been a couple of surveys that show us that at least 24 million Europeans have done some sort of platform work at least once. And out of these people, we know that 3 million do it as the main job, their main job. And we have around 9 million people who do that as a secondary source of income. So it's not a negligible number anymore. And it is set to grow because we have seen that worldwide the work on platform has increased 30% over just 2 years. So this is set to grow. And no one is here to stop it from growing. I think the important thing to realize is that someone call it, Jacob call it gig economy 1.0, is that this organic growth has its limits when we talk about working conditions of those working through platforms. And these limits are now extremely visible, and they have been even more visible during the pandemic, especially for those that work on what we call on-location digital platforms, so the drivers and the riders, because of course they were very much exposed to face-to-face direct contact sort of task and activity, and this showed how vulnerable they are in situations of sanitary crisis, for example. And they, in many cases, help traditional business stay afloat, because if you think of restaurants that probably would have to stop their business for 3 months, they used very much platform and food delivery to actually reach the customers. So there has been also an evolution here that was a bit, well, it was exponential compared to what we knew before COVID. Now, I think one important thing to also to say in terms of the demographics of who works in the platforms, at least in Europe, These are mainly young people, so they're younger than those that work in traditional business, let's put it this way, and they're mainly men. So our figures say we are talking about 2/3 of workers being men and 1/3 being women. Now, when we look at what is happening in terms of the working conditions, obviously the situation of the rider is the one that is most visible, but it's clearly not the only thing that we are looking at. If you think of the journalists, for example, who have now asked to provide their pieces into small articles, and they're paid by the number of lines they write, or the translators that do the translation of texts not by big pieces but by the number of sentences they translate. All this is now potentiated by the use of platform, because you don't necessarily have to be in an organized space to do those sorts of tasks. And of course, the platform work allows for this type of activities to flourish much more. And so it is not just about food delivery. It's everywhere. It's in many sectors. It's in the care sector, as it has been said. So this is for us bigger than just one specific sectoral approach. What is interesting for us, obviously, is that the debate is out there, and it is there in the public domain, public meaning also here in academics, businesses, but also at government level. We know that many countries in the EU are looking into this issue because there is public pressure to address the problem. And there have been a number of court cases throughout different countries in the EU where the courts are asked to deliberate on a number of issues related to the employment status of those working in platform and so forth. So it's no longer possible for the European Commission to just stay silent. The debate is out there, and there is an European dimension, because these platforms also work cross borders. 1/3 of the work that is done in platforms in the EU is cross-border. Now, the consultation we've launched today is quite wide-ranging. It does address on location and on platform, online platforms, as long as they have activities in the EU. And in terms of issues that it addresses, it covers things that are related to technology, because otherwise they would not exist, like algorithm management. We haven't spoken yet about this, but it is there and it is propelled by technology. And it also addresses things that I would say have nothing to do with technology, and they're really related to the employment status and this bug we had in the social protection system that for many decades did not really cover for protection of the self-employed, as Diana has mentioned. So it is quite wide-ranging in the way we are looking into this issue. There are new issues that were not there 10 years ago, like algorithm management, and there are just issues that have been there all the time, but now it just has become so visible and so much to the forefront that is necessary to address them in order to have a sustainable growth of platform work. And that is, I think, our goal is to allow for growth to be sustainable and to be accompanied with fair working conditions, and that the jobs created in the platform work are quality jobs and do provide sufficient protection and social rights to those who choose to work through platform. I think there is one argument that is extremely important for us, is to look on what companies think also. It is a matter of protection of workers, but also what companies think. And for us, it's also a matter of fair competition and level playing field. Because if there are companies in the analog world, I call it, that do obey to their responsibilities and do contribute with social contributions. But then they are faced with a different business model in the same sector who just undercuts all that. We don't think this is fair competition. There is a difference in the way the two business models are operating. So that is one thing. The second is that I think the digital platforms are now really seeking legal certainty across the single market, because we see that different jurisdictions across the EU are answering the problem differently. And you probably have seen, for example, this week the ruling of the UK Supreme Court about what Uber workers are in the UK. This is a Dutch company, so it was Uber, the Netherlands, based in the UK. I mean, of course, the UK a few months ago was still in the EU, so that would be a perfect case to just talk about here. But still, I think it's still relevant to show that there is an issue of legal certainty across the single market that merits our attention and requires action. We launched this consultation now to social partners. This is the first phase. We are in the listening mode. We are not setting the rules or the direction. There will be a second stage consultation before the summer. This second stage then will go a little bit more into detail on the options that the Commission can take and what kind of traveling we are envisaging. And throughout these two stages, the social partners could actually tell us, well, we want to negotiate this between us. And I think that would be a very strong signal that social dialogue in Europe works and is result-driven. Should they decide not to negotiate because the parties do not necessarily come to an understanding that they can negotiate, of course, then the Commission will make a proposal at the end of the year about this, a legislative proposal, and this will be accompanied with a proposal around competition law and whether self-employed, solo self-employed that are considered vulnerable self-employed can collectively organize and enter in collective negotiations with the platforms. So I think those two initiatives, the one on competition law and the one related to working conditions, marry themselves very well because they relate to the same issue, but they also can bring a coherent, I hope, a coherent response at EU level to some of the old issues and some of the new issues that we are now facing when we talk about platform. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Anna Carla. Lots of things you touched upon. I mean, I think the hope that the parties will be able to negotiate, it's very, very minimal in a sense. I mean, like, at least if you look at, you know, the status of the debate at the moment, I mean, like, you know, parties are very polarized, particularly on the issue of let's say, on the employment thing. But this can also be driven probably by, indeed, by the confusion in the debate somehow, which is, as we have said, I mean, like, has been focusing on certain specific type of platforms. I wanted to ask you specifically one thing before generalize the questions. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned this of the competition policy legislative initiative that you might, I mean, you probably will put in place as a European Commission, and that will be consistent with what you're doing now. But there are many other dimensions in which the Commission is acting in the digital economy that may have, you know, a relevance for this. I mean, the Data Governance Act, you know, the artificial intelligence. We will soon have the follow-up, and so defining high risk and low risk. I mean, all that discussion which obviously interact with algorithm monitoring, what you were mentioning. So how do you ensure that the Commission will be able to really have a consistent approach on all these dimensions, in particular from the perspective, of course, that we are covering right now on, so for online platform workers?
Mario, I normally say, the commission doing is like the German sausage. You eat it, but you don't want to know how it's made. So, but obviously, it is very much about cooperation across the different services of the Commission. I mean, without that, it is impossible to actually achieve to a coherent approach. And as you know, the Commission is what we call a college. So all the things you have mentioned. So, for example, the regulation on artificial intelligence, there will be a proposal on a digital levy tax, levy. All those things are under the portfolio of Vice President Vestager, as you probably know. She's also very much involved in what we have launched today. This is also under her leadership with Commissioner Schmidt. And obviously, there is between the services and at cabinet's level a very strong dialogue at all levels to make sure that what we are saying in one piece then relates to and is coherent with the next. Now, I think what is important here is that obviously digitalization and the gig economy, I mean, this is much broader. Huh? And so the things that Vice President Vestager will put on the table address the challenges of the digital age in its broader sense. Through this consultation, we are now really focusing on working conditions, which is an essential aspect of the transformation to a digital age, but not always at the forefront of the thinking when we discuss the digital transformation. I think most people, when they think about digital transformation, they think about the robots, they think about how artificial intelligence is coming to change the way we interact and buy and so forth. And that's all good because it's also a consumer perspective, but there is also the worker perspective, right. and this is quite specific to this initiative.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I mean, like, of course, it's a tricky matter anyway. So let me pick on some of the questions that have been asked on Slido, and also, I mean, I will ask the general question for all of you to to address. So I have here one that is very much up in the ranking. Recently, the UK Supreme Court, as we have seen, has ruled that Uber must treat drivers as employees rather than self-employed, what Anna Carla mentioned. Does the panel think that this will spread across other platforms and markets, changing the shape of the platform economy? I mean, like, very broad. I mean, like, how much this, of course, this is UK, but we have seen other courts, as Anna Carla mentioned, is, for example, in Netherlands. In Italy, there was another court that actually said that they are not the cyclists of Deliveroo, they are not employees. So there is a lot of inconsistencies. But I mean, I think let's say the gist of this question is like how much the courts can influence really, the approach that we have at European level. Will we achieve consistency through legal precedent? Probably. I mean, I guess. I mean, like, that's a little bit the idea of the question. There is also one specific question for Payal. This attendee, Susan Brown Shafi, is asking who will be liable for covering the cost of the lifelong learning discussed by you, Payal. I recall a panel in 2019 OECD Forum where it was discussed that those who most need such learning are those who are least able to afford it, which is very interesting. I mean, like if you want to pick up on that, and then others, and they are now popping up, so we'll keep them there. So just let's have a round first, and then I will ask you those questions afterwards. But I would like also, when we do this second round, I would like you to just share your thoughts about this big thing. I mean, like, as I mentioned at the beginning, what is the role of the private sector and what is the role of the public sector in your view? I mean, how do they interact? Anna Carla was very clear. She said, I mean, like, we try to let you do it by yourself. If we don't manage, I mean, like, we will have to intervene. Is this possible? What are your feelings about it? Please, I mean, like,
I can.
Please, Jakob, go ahead, and then we do a round. I mean, like, I'll follow my screen. I don't know if it's your thing. But,
that's good.
Okay, right, go ahead.
Yeah, you directed. So, yeah, I think the job of us as entrepreneurs is to apply, innovate and apply most recent technology to make our world better and utilize resources more efficiently. And if we are given frameworks and rules that ensure that we work towards goals like worker rights and worker fair work, etc., then we will make that happen. If we don't, then we will resort to traditional competition, and that's putting revenues and profit ahead, because the biggest one wins. So what I would like to see from the politicians, from the European Commission, is very simple. It's three things. It's legislation, it's incentives, and it's accessibility. And this needs to be EU-wide, because allowing each nation to have their own system will hurt the European Union a lot long term. It's like building railroads with different size tracks. It's idiotic. So legislation should be EU-wide, and it should clarify responsibilities for platforms, provide guidance in the administrative space. What should we do in the physical working environment? Do you expect us to do anything there? Well, I hope not, because we can't be everywhere a babysitter is working. But also the systematic space. What do you expect for us to do systematically? Incentive-wise, so the second point, we are fighting a black market that's uninsured and unregulated and so on. Babysitting, tutoring, dog minding, fence painting, all of these jobs they have been paid with black money forever. So cash in hand. So we need to put an incentive in place to make sure that it's easy for people to take these kinds of jobs. So whatever, put a limit, say 5,000 euros a year, something that makes sure that these are extra jobs that people can take, and they want to be part of the system rather than go outside of it, because then people will just continue doing what they've always done. And inside that incentive package, there should be a baseline benefits, pension, insurance, all of that good stuff, but not guaranteed, sick leave and guaranteed, if you work a certain amount of hours, that you're guaranteed a full-time job, because then we're working against the flexibility. That's the purpose of the platform economy. So a good baseline. And thirdly, accessibility. So anywhere in the EU, my vision would be that any private individual can go to their bank and say, I want to work as an independent worker. Can you set up an account for me? The bank sets that up, and all the money that arrives in there, the bank makes sure that the correct taxes are deducted automatically. The money in that account you can spend. So you don't need to be sending in forms and all of this crap. As a young person, the money that's in your account is possible to spend. And whether you charge through Mastercard, Stripe, Visa, it should not matter. Money that comes to the account is automatically debited tax. So the money in there you can spend. And the second part is to make it easier for us platforms. So it is not easy for Yepster to be an employer. It took us nearly 200,000 euros and 12 months of development to build this salary system. And all of these systems that the government runs is archaic. So there are huge barriers to entry for new platforms to arrive. So that's the third one on accessibility.
Okay, no, lots of points. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with all of them, but I mean, like, interesting suggestion. Payal, please, you come next in my video, and then Diane, and then Anna Carla. Can you please also address that question, the question that was posed to you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go quickly because I know we're running out of time. But in terms of the question about the role of the public and private sector, I would just say each sector has a role in addition to civil society, in addition to the worker, him or herself. I think there's something incredibly impactful if you compare the agility and innovation of the private sector with the public sector's ability to create cutting edge inclusive policy. And one of the ways I think about it, Mario, is the private sector can come, and when I'm talking about private sector, I'm talking macro, not just the digital platforms themselves. You know, I'm talking about financial service providers, in addition, financial technologies, technology companies. I think there's some opportunity to create some really innovative and commercially sustainable and scalable initiatives. But for those to succeed, the enabling environment and the ecosystem has to be ready for it. And so that's why I think, you know, the public and private sectors really have to work hand in hand, and hopefully this consultation will enable that. In terms of the question about who should bear the cost of lifelong learning, I would just say what we're following very closely, and I know there's been quite a bit of renewed interest around, is what France is doing around the individual learning accounts, where each French citizen has control over a certain amount of euros on an annual basis to invest in their own lifelong learning. And what we've seen, at least in the data, is that there's not 100% uptake. And so part of the reason we're building out this AI-powered career management and employability platform is actually to help French workers, especially low mobility, low income workers, think about how they use those portable benefits for lifelong learning in a more effective, strategic, and deliberate way. So it's a model in terms of the government providing this portability this benefit that's portable specifically for lifelong learning that we're following quite closely, and could be a really interesting model for others to replicate across the EU.
It's very promising. You're right. Yeah. Diane, thank you. Diane, please.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I would take the court questions since it's so interesting and timely, because here in the US, we've had similar legal battles. And what I would say is that the strategy of, you know, policy by trial is ineffective and expensive and time consuming. So it's not a path that I think is going to fundamentally impact the growth or the structure of the gig economy. And really the proof is in the pudding, you know, here in the US. California had a very contentious battle over Assembly Bill 5 that was very similar to the case in the UK, where they tried to legislate that Uber had to apply a test that would result in their drivers being employees. And it passed and nothing changed, which was no surprise, because we've had that exact same law on the books in Massachusetts for a decade, and it hasn't had any impact at all. There are issues with enforcement. Many of the tests that determine whether you're a contractor or an employee are vague and subjective, so they're very hard to implement. My view on the Supreme Court case in the UK is that it will befall a similar fate, and it will not have any meaningful impact. I think if you want to impact how gig workers are treated and how gig economy companies implement their business models, it has to come from a policy that applies to those companies. And governments certainly have significant leeway to implement labor policies, to implement fines around enforcement. We have not seen that kind of political will so far, and we're a decade into this experiment. The platform economies and the gig workers are players in the game, but governments set the rules, and the rules are ineffective right now. And I think going the legal route is not going to change that.
But I mean, like I'd say you don't believe in the narrative that this such intervention by the public would let's say would reduce the disruptive force of the online platforms, or would reduce their profitability in such a way that the toy would be spoiled?
I don't think there's any evidence that that's true. I think if you look at these legal attempts in different jurisdictions, whether it's in Europe or the US, I think the empirical data that they are effective in any way is extremely limited to non-existent.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I tend to agree. Anna Carla, thank you, Diane.
Well, I think, we are not here with a blank page, so I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. This is not something we can sketch out of nothing and just create a model that would be perfect. We have history, we have traditions, and I think that the traditions in the EU and the complexity of our system will have an impact in the way we will address the issue, because obviously we are talking about 27 member states. I'm really surprised and pleased for a Swede to tell, well, we just need rules and we will apply them, because normally, for example, the Nordic countries will say we should put all on collective bargaining. That is the strength of our model. So we have that tradition there in the North. But in the South, for example, it's much more law-driven. The evolution of labor rights is very much related to law. So we have that diversity to start with, to have to deal. And of course, I think this one of the issues that is around employment status and the fact that employment status leads to gives access to social rights and social obligations, obviously. This is rooted very much on what the welfare system is. And I mean, if you look back in the beginning of the welfare system in Europe, at least, I don't know so much about the American model, and I apologize for that. In Europe, the welfare system was fundamentally, as Dan mentioned, driven by the full-time worker, the conditions of a full-time worker. And back in the 30s, in the 40s, the self-employed was really considered as the risk lover, the entrepreneur, the person that has some capital of its own and is going out there and assumes the risk for the good and the bad. If it's good, well, there's a lot of profit. If it's bad, then that's it. That's part of the game. But I mean, this idea of the entrepreneur equals to the self-employed is no longer the reality. We have that, obviously. We have that also in Europe, thank God. But the self-employed is also the guy who has just a bike, and to be able to have some money at the end of the month, he will accept this sort of gig, if I can use the English expression, until he finds another job. So you cannot say the self-employed are an homogeneous group. This is no longer the reality. And the welfare state in most of the member states was based on that very notion that the self-employed was the risk lover and was outside of the system. Now, some countries have evolved in trying to adjust to the situation. So, for example, my own country in Portugal, the self-employed now have to pay contributions for their pensions, because one day they will also benefit from the pension system in Portugal. But this evolution is quite is not homogeneous across the member states and not across all branches of social security. So we have to bring this element of diversity across the EU to the equation, because we are not one country. I mean, that is an important element when we are looking for a solution. And the second aspect, of course, is the level of interference that Brussels or the EU has in social matters. And the treaties on this, give very much the focus. I mean, the competences lie very much on the member states. So the leeway for the Commission to act is there. There is space, but it's not an open avenue. I mean, there are limits to what Brussels can do. So I think the policy action that some of you advocated, and I personally agree with, I mean, that this needs to be driven by policy in Europe, is shaped by these circumstances. We are not a homogeneous bloc. We have 27 realities, 27 traditions, I would say. And of course, the level of responsibility is different, whether you're sitting in Brussels or in Rome or in Stockholm.
That's a very important point. Look, we are almost at the end of this event. I mean, I would like actually to keep you for another couple of hours, but we cannot. So we just have 3 minutes. There are 2 questions that I will read quickly, and then I will give you, like, we do like 40 seconds each. I mean, like, you tell me if you want to reply to something. I mean, just manage your time. How would a pension system work for a full-time platform work? And looking at the current social pattern list, this is more for Ana Carla. There is a clear bias towards unions, highly traditional working association. Neither platform nor self-employed are represented. Is this consultation going to be fair or not? So a criticism for the European Commission. Jakob, 30 seconds if you want to say something, remarks on what has been said. I'm sorry, we are really running out of time, but
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I'm very positive with the development. I've had several discussions with the Minister of Labour here in Sweden, and to see her, really step into this space and learn to embrace it, I think is key. And that's what we need to see from all our politicians. In Sweden, we have a prime minister who has never shopped anything online, and him and the Minister of Labour have, their whole working careers from unions. And of course, that shapes the opportunities they see. So I think we should demand that from our leaders. Regarding pensions and so on, I can't see any reason why platforms should not be able to address that. Like of course we can. Just set the rules for us, make it easy for us to employ people, because for our business models to work, we need to employ thousands, not 10, 20. So that's what we need.
Sounds very good. Thank you. Payal.
Yeah, I would just say, going back to my comments about, thinking through incentives and thinking through behavior change. When I think about pensions, I actually think a little bit broader, and I think about savings. So how can we incentivize platform workers to save, and how do we break it down into small micro goals? Because I think there's a real opportunity there, and we have to remember that a lot of platform workers and gig workers didn't intend to be gig workers or platform workers, and always thought that they might have had an exit strategy and might be stuck in the system. And so trying to create a bit of a mind shift about that long-term need to plan, I think is incredibly important for the financial health of these workers.
Thank you very much. Diane.
Yeah, I think in terms of pensions, I would say the same thing I say about just extending most benefits to all workers, which is we have an existing infrastructure for providing those benefits. And it's quite simple, I think, to prorate those benefits. So if you have somebody who's working as an independent contractor or freelancer or consultant with a company, their contributions can be prorated and using the same infrastructure system. I don't see it a huge barrier in terms of execution. Again, I think it's political will, decision-making. Yes, we're going to extend these benefits to all workers.
Okay, thank you very much, Diane. And finally, Ana Carla, your last words.
Yes, today and here, I hope not my last words in general. No. I count on living a little bit longer. No, but yes, I would go in the same line of what Diana said. I mean, it's the system is there. It is the system in all member states in the EU. It's a system where you contribute, and later on, you will get a protection when you're older. That's the principle of solidarity and social insurance. So it is a matter of that. It is a matter of setting the rules that those that are working as self-employed contribute, so that later they are eligible for protection. And this already happens in some countries, so it's not impossible. And of course, when you talk about platform work, the rule is also simple. If there would be a system where in the country where the platform is acting, if there is a system where the self-employed are a part of the social contribution systems, then this would also be possible for those that work through platform. And they can also become employees, because this is what we also see. I mean, we have the case, the Swedish case presented today, but there are examples in the Netherlands. So it's not that all people working through platforms are self-employed. And I think if you allow me a last word,
yeah.
I think one interesting thing in the UK ruling is exactly this notion. I mean, the UK court actually tries to argue that having a labor contract is not in opposition of flexibility. You can be flexible in your working arrangements while having a work contract, but this work contract then allows you, in the current setting of social protection in the EU, in the different member states, to have access to a number of rights, like the pension system.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you very much. I mean, like we are just 3 minutes above. I mean, like I apologize for that, but it was so interesting, and I personally have learned a lot hearing you. So thank you very much to all of you, to Jacob, Ayal, Diane, and Anna Carla for being with us. And I hope you all who were tuning, listening, and watching this, I mean, like you also enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you, and bye bye to everybody. We cannot clap. I mean, but thank you.